The rain had been falling for hours in the small town of Brookfield, Missouri. Gray clouds pressed down on the streets, and most people hurried by with umbrellas, heads bent, eyes tired. But inside, a little cafe called Sunrise and Steam, a woman named Clara Jennings stood behind the counter with the warmest smile in town. She wasn't young anymore, perhaps in her mid-50s, but her eyes had that gentle spark people trusted. She'd owned the cafe for almost 20 years, ever since her husband passed away in an accident that could have broken her completely. But Clara had made a choice that day. If I can't change what happens, I'll change how I see it. That one sentence had become her way of living. Clara's cafe wasn't big, but it was special. Every wall was painted in soft yellow tones, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, and handwritten quotes hung above the tables. One said, "You can't always choose your circumstances, but you can always choose your attitude." Locals came there not just for coffee, but for comfort. When someone was having a bad day, they came to Clara. She would smile, listen, and pour them a warm cup of peace. One rainy morning, a young man entered the cafe soaked, shivering, eyes full of defeat. His name was Daniel, a 27-year-old software engineer who had just been laid off. He sat by the window, staring blankly outside. Clara noticed him immediately. She'd seen that look before, the look of someone who had forgotten how to believe. "Rough morning?" she asked, setting down a mug of coffee in front of him. Daniel gave a weak smile. "More like a rough life." Clara chuckled softly. "That's quite a claim for someone who's still got more than half of it left." He sighed. "You don't understand. I worked for years to get here. Now it's all gone." Clara leaned on the counter, her voice calm and steady. "Maybe it's not gone. Maybe it's just changing." "Changing?" he repeated bitterly. "I lost my job, my apartment, and my confidence. What could possibly be positive about that?" Clara smiled. "You haven't lost everything. You still have your heart beating, your mind working, and your next choice waiting." "That's a lot." Daniel looked away, unwilling to admit that her words touched something deep inside. The next day, Daniel returned. Then again, the day after that. Clara greeted him each time with the same smile. On the third morning, he finally asked, "Why are you always so happy?" She laughed. "Oh, I'm not always happy, but I try to be grateful. There's a difference." Then she told him her story. 20 years ago, she'd lost her husband in a car crash. She had no savings, no plan, just this tiny cafe that barely made enough to pay rent. "I could have given up," she said quietly. "And believe me, I wanted to. But then one morning I looked in the mirror and asked myself, if I keep thinking the worst, will my life get better?" The answer was no. So I decided to think differently, to believe there's light even in dark rooms. And you know what? Slowly, the light started showing up. Daniel listened silently. It wasn't a lecture, it was real, raw, human. Over the next few weeks, Daniel became a regular at Sunrise and Steam. He helped Clara fix the old espresso machine, carried bags of flour, and even designed a digital menu for her small business. Clara always encouraged him. Positivity isn't pretending everything's perfect. It's believing that imperfection still has value. One day, Daniel walked in carrying a stack of job applications. He looked nervous but hopeful. Clara gave him a cup of coffee and said, "You don't need to control everything, Daniel. Just control your energy. The rest follows." 2 weeks later, a woman came into the cafe, Megan Carter, a local entrepreneur who owned several bakeries in the city. She was impressed by the warmth of the place and the digital setup Daniel had helped install. "Who designed this for you?" she asked Clara. Daniel, standing nearby, blushed slightly as Clara smiled proudly. "He did." Megan offered him her card. "We're expanding. I could use someone like you, someone who understands both people and design." Daniel stared at the card, like it was a dream. He had been so close to giving up. Yet here was life, giving him another chance. That evening, Daniel stayed back to clean. He turned to Clara and said softly, "You changed my life." She shook her head. "No, Daniel, you did. You changed the way you think, and that changed everything else." He smiled, tears in his eyes. "I used to think positivity was fake. Now I see its power." Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. "Exactly. Positivity doesn't deny pain. It directs it toward purpose." Spring came early that year. Daniel had started working for Megan's company and was doing well. But more importantly, he had learned to smile again. Every morning before work, he stopped by Sunrise and Steam for coffee, not just to drink, but to remember. One morning he handed Clara a small box wrapped in blue paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a golden keychain shaped like a sun, engraved with 3 words: "Choose the light." Clara looked up, her eyes shining. Daniel said, "Because of you, I learned that every morning gives us 2 choices: focus on the storm or look for the Sunday. And I'll never forget that." 5 years passed. The cafe had grown brighter, busier, more alive than ever. Clara still stood behind the counter, still smiling, still spreading warmth. But now, she wasn't alone. Daniel had become her business partner, opening 3 new branches called the Sunrise Cafe. Each one carried a sign at the door. Positivity is not the denial of reality. It's the decision to see beyond it. People came from all over town, not just for the coffee, but for the feeling of peace it gave them. And every time Clara looked around, she whispered to herself, "See, you don't have to chase happiness. Just water the seeds of positivity, and it finds you." One evening, Clara sat outside as the sun dipped low behind the hills. She thought of her late husband, her struggles, the pain, the tears, and then the laughter that came after. She smiled softly. "Life isn't perfect," she whispered, "but it's still beautiful." A customer passed by and waved. Clara raised her cup and said her favorite line, "No matter what you're facing, choose to see the light. That's where miracles begin." Positivity isn't about ignoring pain, it's about believing and healing. What you focus on grows. When you focus on hope, your whole life begins to bloom.